Magic is weird, and this is a list of every card with a unique rules reference. You don't love Magic until you come to love the comprehensive rules. While the heart of the game is the act of playing it, going out and meeting new frenemies, the soul of the game is right here, contained in this behemoth of a document. Over the years, I've spent countless hours reading this doc, and to express my love for it, I want to present a video about every edge case in Magic, including cards with unique wordings, cards that are specifically called out in the rules, and cards that do things that no other cards can do. This is a companion video to my previous upload about how reading the card doesn't explain the card. You don't need to have watched that video first, but I would appreciate it if you checked it out as well. Here's how this video works. 1. A card that shows up in this video is unique in one or more ways. 2. We'll focus on every card with a unique entry in the comprehensive rules, including direct callouts and oddly specific rules. It'll also include every card that contains a unique string of text, symbol, action, or designation. And 4, I'll try to organize these vaguely from least interesting to most niche, so stick around till the end. Some disclaimers. These lists will only include cards that are completely, syntactically, or mechanically unique. Even though a card like Chaos Orb is notoriously weird, it shares wording with Falling Star, so it gets an honorable mention at best. We'll also not cover Silver Border or Acorn cards, schemes, conspiracies, or other supplemental cards. And we'll only cover individual cards and not interactions between them, so if you're looking for weird layers things, you're in the wrong place. And finally, the rules are ever changing, so expect this video to only be accurate up through 2024. The 10 categories of cards are as follows. First are the sets of anomalies that pertain to the cards themselves. Keywords that are only featured on one card, cards that reference unconventional numbers or values, or cards that reference specific text. Next are the categories of anomalies that make players do things, referencing the game itself and enforcing minigames, or effects that allow players to make unique actions or actions at weird times. And finally are the categories of cards that form highly specific edge cases. These include a subset of cards that see into the past, 2 that see into the future, and a whole bunch that can only be described as oopsies. Let's begin. Keywords. Magic uses keywords to abbreviate text on cards that share the same effect, but in some cases the rules define keywords that only exist on one card at a time. The most familiar of these came in 2007 with the Future Sight set, which introduced 16 new keywords as one-ofs. Of these, all but 4 have been reprinted, which means that some of these original cards still hold a monopoly over their respective keyword definitions. To this day, Arcanum Wings is the only card with Aura Swap, Flesh Writher the only Transfigure, Frenzy Sliver Frenzy, and Lymph Sliver Absorb. And yes, this means Gravestorm has been reprinted. Outside of Future Sight, Space Balerion is the only card with Space Sculptor, and of the variant keywords, Thrasta and Yuriko are the only instances of Trample over Planeswalker and Commander Ninjutsu, respectively. Hey, I know this video is really long and most of you won't make it till the end, but can you do me a solid anyway? I spent a lot of time making this video and I just need you to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon link down below. I want to keep making content, so I need all the support I can get. Symbols and numbers. In terms of numerals, Karth the Lion isn't the only card that uses the loyalty symbol in rules text anymore, but is the only one that uses Rule 606.5. Karth is worded as a tax effect, and this rule handles composite loyalty costs. Rage Extractor is the only time we'll see the color-agnostic Phyrexian mana symbol, mentioned in 107.4G. Like how each of the 5 colors is abbreviated with a letter, the short form for the symbol is H. Although Charrumbler has negative power, Spinal Parasite is the only creature with a fully negative base stat line. And speaking of cards with Sunburst, Arcbound Wanderer is the only card that invokes Rule 702.44c, which allows Sunburst to function as a number rather than a static ability. Midnight Clock's wording means it's the only card defined by Rule 122.7, which handles when the nth counter is put on something, in this case the 12th counter. Usually effects like this check when something has a certain amount of counters rather than triggering on the act of placing a specific counter. Rasputin Dreamweaver is the only card that has a maximum amount of counters it can hold, and therefore it has not one but two unique rules, 122.4 which defines this ability, and 704.5R which is a Rasputin-specific state-based action that removes extra counters when there are too many. Trinisphere is, well, Trinisphere. It sets a minimum mana cost of 3 mana when casting spells. It's the last effect we check after discounts and taxes, and the only effect of its kind. Names and text. Spy Kit has an effect that grants every non-legendary creature name to an equipped creature. Spy Kit is directly called out in the rules under 612.7, which further clarifies that the name must be present in the Oracle. Garth One-Eye and Magar of the Magic Strings are the only two cards that make copies of cards by their name. They both do this slightly differently, and so are filed under 707.13 and 707.14 respectively. Most copy effects require an object to copy. However, Garth creates spells out of thin air, while Magar creates them out of memory. Apocalypse Chime, City in a Bottle, and Golgothian Silex are the only three cards that reference entire expansions. For clarity, the three entries of 206.3 list every single applicable card, so you don't need to memorize every first printing. Exchange of Words is the only card to reference text boxes and allows us to swap them. This is defined in Rule 612.5, and yes, this card is legal in Commander. Volrath Shapeshifter is one of few cards that care about the order of cards in your graveyard, but more importantly is the only card to reference full text, defined in Rule 612.6. The short explanation for why this card doesn't just say copy is something with layers. It's the first and likely the only time we'll ever see the phrase full text in the Oracle. Metagaming. Shahrazad is the only card that can start subgames, and Karn Liberated can restart games. Section 726 defines subgames, with 726.6 handling subgames within subgames. Section 724 tells us what to do when we restart a game, and its subclause 724.6 handles restarting a subgame. I hope no one has to ever invoke these rules. Divine Intervention is the only card whose sole function is to draw the game, and thus is also arguably the only card in Magic that can never help us win a game. At the very least, One with Nothing is a discard outlet, and Break Open can maybe cause a flip effect to fire at the wrong time, but the best you can do with Divine Intervention is play a different 8-mana enchantment. Cryptic Spires is a card whose main effect happens outside of the game. It's directly mentioned by Rule 207.5. To use it, you have to circle 2 color symbols printed on the card as you create your deck, changing its printed rules text. Unsurprisingly, it's the only card that tells you to circle something on it. And yes, this one is legal in Commander too. Minigaming. In terms of cards that create minigames, the 3 most convoluted versions are Raging River, Camouflage, and Illusionary Mask. Raging River has players split their creatures onto 2 sides of a river, and each side can only block creatures that attack from the same side. That is, unless they can fly over the river. Camouflage allows the attacking player to declare attacks in secret. The defending player can choose to block, but they won't know what they're blocking until their decision is made. And Illusionary Mask allows you to cast any creature from your hand face down, allowing you to spend as much mana as you want to conceal its identity. Once that creature becomes active though, the illusion wears off. Needless to say, these extremely dated designs are each one of a kind, and few other cards come close. Spiritual successor is Goblin Game, whose Oracle text is the only one to instruct players to hide at least one item. Everyone takes damage, but the player who hid the fewest loses half their life. The Oracle rulings make sure to mention, when it comes to a choice of items, use common sense. Items should be small enough to hide, but large enough to count. Outside of these, Celebrate 1000 and Centaur of Attention are 2 cards that use dice rolls. Although many cards use dice, Celebrate 1000 is the only black bordered card to define rolling doubles with Rule 706.5, and Centaur of Attention is the only card to store dice rolls with Rule 706.8. Importantly though, can someone explain to me why Celebrate 1000 has these keywords minus the first 2 letters as 5 of its Oracle rulings? Actions. Let's talk about cards that enforce unique actions or create exclusive situations with normal actions. Serum Powder is one of the few cards that affect the game before it even begins. It might not have a direct rules callout, but it's the only card that affects how you mulligan at the start of the game. Within a game, there's only one card that allows you to end a phase, Mandate of Peace, which is referenced in Rule 721.2. And Fossil Fund is the only card that explicitly allows you to reorder the cards in your graveyard. This one is interesting because, in the strictest sense, players are not allowed to do so otherwise, unless you're playing under Magic Tournament rules in a format post-Urza Saga. But let's add some mana. Elemental Resonance is the only card that adds mana equal to the mana cost of a card, distinct from the mana value. This means that it's the only card that can attempt to add a Phyrexian, Hybrid, Generic, or Snow symbol to your mana pool. Luckily, these are handled by 106.9 through 106.12, which convert these symbols to basic colored or colorless mana. Doubling Cube works intuitively, but it must be noted that 701.9F states that if we double mana, we actually add new mana rather than copying it, meaning any restrictions or effects on the original mana aren't copied. Of course, Doubling Cube is the only card that can double mana, so this rule only applies here. Drain Power, on the other hand, forces your opponent to generate all the mana they can and then lose all unspent mana. Any mana loss is added to your mana pool. Rule 106.13 specifies that Drain Power will retain the qualities of that mana, including those restrictions and bonus effects. Siren's Call is a card I always bring up to the folks on Custom Magic. It temporarily forces every creature to attack and destroys those that don't. However, the important part is that it showcases how the game can apply global effects to certain objects and not others. The Ignore action is extremely flexible and we ought to see it more. Circling Vultures is a weird card that allows you to discard it for no reason, at instant speed. Rule 116.2e clarifies that this is one of 12 special actions, and the only one of its kind. To be clear, this type of discard isn't linked to any costs like channel effects or Fairy Macabre, and you can just do it. Multitasking. Panglacial Worm needs no introduction. It allows you to cast it as long as you're searching your library. The applications are limited because it boils down to a 7-mana trampler, but my favorite use for this card is as a combo piece in Raga Draga EDH decks. Ask me if you're interested. Averna the Chaos Bloom also allows you to multitask. While you're cascading, you can put one of the lands you find onto the battlefield. This is handled by Rule 702.85b, which currently only applies to Averna. Word of Command shares a niche ruling with Opposition Agent, but it makes this list because of the sheer amount of unique strings found in its effect. It forces your opponent to multitask on your behalf. I'll let you figure this one out on your own time. There are 3 cards that require you to handle additional effects only as long as they're on the stack. Karvek's Torch is the only card with a flat static ability that's only active on the stack. Lightning Storm is an instant with an activated ability on the stack. And Torrent of Lava has a static ability that grants activated abilities to other objects while it's on the stack. Generally, mentioning the stack is a big design no-no, so these cards are a huge exception. Hindsight. A few cards are unique because of the way they look back in time to check for game information. Benevolent Blessing is an aura that grants protection to a color of your choice. Normally, protection causes auras and equipment to fall off, but Benevolent Blessing states that anything already attached is exempt. Some auras work similarly, but Benevolent Blessing is the only one to care about the timing. Thus, it's filed under its exclusive rule, 702.16p. Furkrag has a unique line of text that checks whether or not a creature had to attack this combat. Upon triggering, it looks back to check for any goad or other forced combat effects, and while it's not mentioned by name in the rules, it's the only card that 506.6 applies to. Titania's Song is the only permanent with a static ability that continues to linger after it leaves the battlefield. It's the only instance of the string this effect continues until end of turn in all of Magic. This is important because unlike one-shot animation effects, it will start to apply to artifacts that enter even after Titania's Song is gone. Reset is a card that untaps all lands you control, but can only be cast after an opponent's upkeep step. This one's a bit weird because its casting condition looks back to check whether an upkeep step has happened. In most turns this is fairly predictable, but we get into weird territory if we somehow skip our first upkeep and get one later on. A skipped phase is treated as though it never existed, so we would only be able to cast Reset after the second upkeep. Sylvan Library is the only card that retains memory of every card that you've drawn so far in a turn. While its effect is easy to process, a famous interaction is that the 2 cards you choose to put back on top of your deck don't have to be the ones you drew off Sylvan Library. When you play Sylvan Library, you're responsible for keeping the cards you've drawn separate from the cards that you began the turn with. Even more egregious though is Jandor's Ring. This card is a tracking nightmare because it only remembers the most recent card you've drawn. This includes keeping track of the last card in a set when you draw multiple cards at once. And the worst part is, unlike Sylvan Library, this discard effect can happen anytime during a turn. Luckily, this card will never see play. Foresight. I'm only going to talk about 2 cards in this section. Break the Ice is very similar conceptually to cards like Exotic Orchard or Reflecting Pool, which all invoke the rule 106.7 that handles the concept of what a land, quote, could produce. To figure this information out, the game looks into the future and simulates what would happen if every mana ability on the relevant lands were to resolve. Break the Ice is a little different from these mana producing effects because it only cares whether at least one of these outcomes matches its condition, and is the only card that checks this both on cast and resolution. A more interesting version of this type of effect is the card Equinox. It's an aura that allows you to counter a spell if it would destroy a land you control. To determine this, it also simulates the future. Equinox goes forward in time and takes into account external elements like indestructibility or shield counters. It's quite flexible and can even counter spells that don't explicitly destroy lands, such as in the case of lands with multiple card types. However, since it checks what that spell would do rather than what it could do, it can only affect spells that would unconditionally destroy one of your lands, that is, without choice or random chance. It's pretty weird to say the least. Rules mistakes. Let's talk about some super obscure edge cases. On the surface, Sideswipe looks like any other redirection spell. However, it's the only one that uses the wording change any targets as described in Rule 115.7d. This is handled differently from effects that say change a target and is filed separately from effects that say choose new targets. Still, it feels less like a standalone mechanic and more like the card somehow dodged errata. Fortunately, Sideswipe is extremely narrow and unplayable, so you'll probably never have to reference this rule. Alms Collector, Ethereal Ambush, and Soulfire Eruption are rules oopsies in the sense that they care about recognizing multiple things at once, despite the rules saying that certain actions must be done independently. Rule 121.2 says that if a player is instructed to draw multiple cards at once, those draws are done individually. This means that cards are never drawn 2 or more at a time. Thus, in order for Alms Collector to function, there's an additional rule under 121.2a that says, just in this one case, you can consider this a multi-draw. Likewise, Manifest can only be performed 1 card at a time, so the mistake on Ethereal Ambush is that it's the only card to instruct a player to manifest the top 2 cards of their library. To fix this, Rule 701.34e changes this to 2 instances of Manifest, 1 at a time. Soulfire Eruption is handled by the ladder clause of Rule 608.2f. The card has its caster choose any number of targets. For each one, they exile the top card of their library and deal damage to that target equal to the exiled card's mana value. Since the amount of damage for each target is variable, 608.2f stipulates that this too must be handled 1 target at a time. Fealty to the Realm and Jared Carthalion have unique rules pertaining to the Monarch. Rule 722.5 handles continuous effects that apply to whomever the Monarch is, but Fealty to the Realm is the only card that actually has an effect that falls under this category. Rule 722.4 handles what happens when a Monarch leaves the game and no player can take the crown. However, Jared Carthalion is the only card that can prevent a player from becoming a monarch. Yet for both of these rules to actually do anything, the conditions that need to happen are extremely unlikely. Basically, every player would have to have their own copy of Jared Carthalion enter on the same turn, and then the active monarch needs to leave the game. But hey, at least we know. Henzi and Zinnia both have insane rules baggage due to how they grant their associated keywords. Notably, both of these cards affect creature spells and not creatures, and therefore things become counterintuitive when removal is involved. I can't get into this now, but know that when Henzi first released in Streets of New Capenna, its effect was actually non-functional for the first 6 months, until they added Rule 400.7a. This ruling makes it so that effects that apply to spells continue to apply even after they become permanents. This was a band-aid fix for effects like these and still haunts me to this day because they're still broken. Let me know in the comments if you want me to elaborate. But to end on an equally confusing note, the last card I want to talk about is Ashiok Wicked Manipulator. They have a one-of-a-kind effect that allows you to exile cards from the top of your library instead of paying life. This card has an interesting rules interaction that's a byproduct of its unique effect. In the event where 1. You put a permanent directly into play from the top of your deck without casting, and 2. There's an associated life payment, that cost is paid before moving the card from the library. This is problematic with Ashiok because the replacement effect would exile the card you're paying life for, at which point you can't have paid life because that permanent isn't entering. Luckily, 614.13c solves this mistake by saying that any card that's entering won't be included for exile even though they're still in the library as the effect is applied. Currently, Ashiok is the only card affected by this rule. And with that, that's every mechanically unique card in Magic the Gathering. Or it would be if I didn't skip 7 of them. You can find the rulings for these on your own time, but I just didn't find them that interesting. Now it's time to speedrun how long it takes for this video to become out of date. Thanks for staying until the end. I make videos about Magic trivia and design. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe for more fun stuff. Thanks to anyone who decides to support me on Patreon, and see you next time.